Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I am doing my Tome Topple wrap-up. So I participated in a readathon over the last 2 weeks from the 7th to the 20th, I believe. And it was a 2-week long period where we read books over 500 pages, or at least attempted to read as much as we could of larger books. And so I did have a TBR which I posted, and you can check it out if you want. I will definitely link it up around so you can, find the video. I did accomplish some of those goals, but of course I didn't read exactly what I was supposed to read. I definitely got sidetracked by other things, but I did, at least accomplish most of the challenges. So originally my TBR was primarily graphic novels, and then I had 2 books that I wanted to choose from, either Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa or East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This was my choice for my adult novel, which was one of the categories. I only made it to page 264 in East of Eden. I didn't actually read very much in Musashi. It was just that due to the size difference, like Musashi is at least twice as big as this novel is at 601 pages. This one was just really easy to get into, and I do have some other reading plans associated with this. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time to read this. I did only end up reading it while I was on my commute to and from work, and I totaled it up. I forgot my book twice. We had a holiday one day, which ended up meaning I didn't end up reading a whole lot. So really, I spent maybe 3 hours reading this if, I was really, really good. 264 pages in 3 hours is, it's alright with me. I don't mind that at all. So I did end up reading about half of this book, and I am planning on finishing it hopefully this month. I am really enjoying it. It's definitely more surprising. Definitely the characters are more kind of warped and twisted and evil than I was kind of anticipating, but that's totally fine. I am enjoying this novel, and I'm really interested in finding out how things progress. So the rest of my TBR were graphic novels. The first title I ended up reading was Veda by Clamp. Actually, this is the last title I ended up reading, but this is a manga or graphic novel, if you will. And it is 626-ish pages. So I ended up reading this actually on the last day, and it was just sort of because I wanted to make sure I read some of the titles on my TBR. Yeah, it was kind of difficult. Basically, this was a pick for a title in a series because it is volume 1. Volume 2 has recently arrived, so I will hopefully read that soon as well. This is not Clamp's best work, but you can definitely, it's definitely an interesting title. I found that this one was kind of hard to read, actually. It was quite, I wouldn't say slow, it was actually you would go from one panel where you would meet a character, you would literally just see them for a second, and then the next panel, they're best friends with this traveling group, and they're already leaving from having spent 2 weeks together. So there was a lot of story missing, there was a lot of pacing problems. It is apparently their first work, Clamp's first work. The one thing that you have to always praise Clamp for is their art. The art in this is really beautiful. It's not as experimental as some of their other works, but it is really, really beautiful, and they're really, I feel like they're just sort of trying to get a handle on creating manga maybe as a group. I don't know. I really actually don't know the history of Clamp at all. It's a very interesting read. I'm definitely interested in reading more of this, but I don't have a lot of thoughts at the moment because I did actually kind of struggle getting through this, and I tried to read it quite quickly, so probably would benefit from a slower read, or maybe a little more story. But I don't currently have any feelings towards any of these characters. I'm not personally invested in pretty much any of the story at this point. The next title that I started reading was another one on my TBR, that's Tomie by Junji Ito. This has, I think, this one I think has 740-ish pages, and I read until page 300-ish, so I'm halfway through this book, and the reason that I didn't finish this one actually was just because it is episodic primarily. The stories are longer than some other like episodic series. They do last a little bit longer, but you know, episodic stories really beg you to read them slower. Like, you need to take some time between each story to kind of absorb the story that we read before, otherwise you kind of miss some details. So I'm going to slow down my reading at this one. I'm really enjoying it though. It is quite grotesque, and it is sort of unexplained who this Tomie character is, but she keeps reappearing. She's this very beautiful character, and she keeps appearing in people's lives, and when she appears, someone in that scenario ends up kind of going mad, and either they themselves die or she ends up dying in sort of like a weird, horrific death. So it is quite grotesque, a little bit disturbing, but I am really enjoying it. And definitely not as refined as Ito's other works, but I believe that this is his first work. And also, I believe that this is a josei work, so if anyone knows that for sure, I'd be very interested, because there aren't a lot of josei horror in my collection, at least. I don't know of too many, so that would be very interesting to know as well. Anyway, I'm enjoying it quite a lot, and I will continue to read this in the upcoming weeks. And the other book on my TBR is this monster, and it's just shy of like 900 pages. There's actually more if you actually count some of the notes and things at the end. But I only made it to about page 85, and again, this is just a title that I think there's so much in it. I really, really was enjoying it when I was reading it, but there's so much in it that I think this is one of those titles that I want to read slower. I don't want to just like push quickly through it. So I'm going to be slowly reading this over the course of the next month, and just really enjoying it. But basically what has happened so far is that it's sort of starting in Osamu Tezuka's childhood, and basically how he liked to draw comics for his friends and for his teachers, and that he just sort of had this knack and aptitude and just sort of like need to draw. And it's really, really sweet. It also includes like photocopy scans on some of the panels of some of his drawings that he drew when he was a child, which is just absolutely adorable. So that's really nice. I also read a little bit about the author, who did in fact work with Tezuka, and this was written very shortly after his death. So they were talking about how that was really fortuitous, because a lot of the people who knew Tezuka were still alive. A lot of his records were still kind of available. So this happens to be a pretty good and accurate representation, not only from someone who knew the man, who worked with him, who understood the way that Tezuka drew. This is sort of drawn in Tezuka's style. It also is very well researched from people who were very close to Tezuka. So I'm really looking forward to going further into this brick. Hopefully, though, Stonebridge Press has made enough money on this that they can see a reason to republish this in a hardcover, because my book is already taking a hit. It's got creases all over the cover. That is not okay with my collection. Really, really bothering me. I really hope that there's a hardcover that comes out. I will definitely replace it if there is, because yeah, this is too big for a little softcover like this. But it's a really good story, and I highly recommend it. Especially if you're interested in comics at all, or manga at all. You know, kind of the god of manga right here in these pages. I did read 2 other tomes that weren't on my TBR. The first one was Haru Hana, the complete collection by Yuana Kazumi. This was published by Tokyopop, and it looks like it was intended to actually be published in single volumes. There are no page numbers, but there are page numbers referred to in the chapter headings, so I actually really think that this was intended to be longer, but it is over 500 pages. I think it's like 600 pages. It's a pretty big one, you can tell right from the get-go. It's pretty cute. You know, it's a complete series in one. Certainly if you like cute, fluffy, shoujo romance that's like really harmless, this is a good one. This is the story about a girl who basically is afraid of being touched, especially of being touched by men. It's not necessarily that anything bad happened to her, she's just they give her hives. So whenever she's touched by a boy, she breaks out in hives. She's allergic to being touched. And it's sort of like she has just gone through some sort of a rehab, and she thinks that she can manage going back to school, and she is able to kind of go to school. And mostly she's cured, except for there's one boy in particular who not only does she get hives from, but he also really likes to pester her and touch her a lot, and so she ends up, you know, having problems all the time. He ends up being sort of like a massage therapist at this little like wellness clinic where she ends up getting a job as well. And it's really just like a cute story about a cute romance with some weird elements about being allergic to being touched. I wouldn't say it's really good, obviously. I can hardly even remember it. It's only been like 2 weeks since I read it, and I reread it because I could hardly remember what it was about. So this author has written a couple of other titles which I would also like to pick up again. Her art is really unique in that it just feels very loose, very kind of watercolor-esque. So there's sort of like a very relaxed feeling to her work as you read it. But it's just sort of like a nice, cute story that doesn't really do anything. It's okay. And then the other title that I ended up picking up was Clover. This is another title by Clamp. And I ended up reading this because my sister had just read it, and then she said, "Have you read this?" And I said, "No, I hadn't." So then she put it in my hands, and I had to read it right then because we had to talk about it. So I'm going to count this as our buddy read because I had to read it right away, which is just kind of funny. It's very Clamp. This is a very Clamp story. The art in it is absolutely gorgeous. I had to stop several times and just be like, look at this art. It's so beautiful. The printing of this is really, really beautiful. You know, Dark Horse did a really, really good job printing this. I think this is an incomplete story, and it has a very unique structure in that it's sort of a flashback structure, or that the story moves backwards. So you get the story about, you get kind of this weird fantasy where a man is being given a task, and basically he's taking this young girl who is a Clover, sort of her last request to go to this certain place. So he's taking her there and being her bodyguard in a sense. And then it slowly progresses back. So you learn what Clovers are, but at the same time it goes back into his story, and it goes back into the girl's story, and it just goes back and back and back. And it's just very like melancholy and sad, but just really, really beautiful. And I really enjoyed it, but it's such a strange thing to read. But what really shines in this story is the art and the panel layout. It's very experimental in its panel layouts. The art is beautiful, and it definitely felt very much like you know, 1920s Art Nouveau, and like there were many instances in it where I just felt like the roundness of some of the metalwork I could have just popped out of some like Alfonso Mucha paintings. Like, it's really, really beautiful. So that's definitely what I was thinking about. Probably not what a lot of people were thinking about, but highly recommend it if you haven't picked this up. If you are a manga reader, because it is definitely strange. It's definitely not something that I would read for a first manga, but it's very beautiful. And this manga is just over 500 pages, so I ended up reading another 1,000 pages of graphic novel on top of whatever my TBR was. And in addition to that, of course, I was still reading a handful of other things. I did end up reading a couple of volumes of Fujoshi Rumi for my Shelf 21 tour, and I did end up reading a couple of volumes of Shugo Chara, which I'm reading for my TBR Star Jar pick for this month. So, you know, some of the other manga reading continued, so I think I did pretty well. I had wished that I had read a little bit more of my novel, but that will finish this month. I am really enjoying it, and I really enjoyed participating in this readathon. Definitely made me pick up some things that I wasn't planning on reading right away, and definitely kind of not super interested in reading because of the length itself, so I am glad on picking some of these things up, and the things that are unfinished hopefully won't stay unfinished. Hopefully they will be finished soon. So anyway, that's everything that I ended up reading for the Tome Topple readathon. If you participated, let me know what you ended up reading. How did you do in the readathon? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.